Open Market is sponsored by AdLib, the self-serve DSP solution making advertising easy. What do the world's largest demand-side platforms have in common? They're effective, but they require large annual contracts and spend minimums. With AdLib, growing agencies get a single platform that connects to every top global DSP with no contracts, no spend minimums, and G2's #1 ranked support. That means access to the entire universe of TV, digital out of home, audio, display, video, and native without a hassle and with no blind spots. It's incredibly easy to use, plus it can automate most of the work your team spends hours a day doing manually. Get the most powerful media buying technology without the barriers to entry. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com today.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. It's a rare treat for you guys today. It's just Eric and me. How's it going, Eric?
How are you, Joe? We made it.
No more guests allowed. We've had enough of them. How many CEOs can we trot through this proverbial room?
Exactly. Hey, it's the end of the year. We did it.
We did it. It was a pretty good 2024.
Yeah, it was a fast year. It was a good year in a lot of ways. And for this pod, we thought for the listener, we would just kind of talk about the year that was, talk about this pod. We're so thankful for everybody who tunes in and subscribes. Thought we'd talk about the story of how this whole thing came together, some of our favorite episodes, some of our favorite guests. Thought we'd talk about like the industry at large, right? Like, things that capture our attention and why, and, some takeaways that we have in mind for 2025 from a biz perspective. So good stuff ahead for the docket today.
Eric, being an operator, is like, yeah, we're just going to talk about some things that are going on or that happened. And I'm like, 5 incredible things you've never seen before. In this video, Eric Franchi, storied venture capitalist, will tell you how to transform your business and make hundreds of millions of dollars.
Amazing.
I was thinking, Eric, I do unfortunately think a little bit of the content game is like shamelessness. Like I was seeing someone clipping, like it's obviously not your style and it's really not my style either. I'm only like mildly more shameless than you are. But like someone was clipping Alex Hormozzi and it was like, why I never go to Christmas dinner, like, and it's like, because I'm grinding all of the time.
I saw that. If I'm remembering the post, if it's the same post, it was like, I spent a decade not going to friends' weddings. Not going. It was just like, whoa, dude. I'm a couple of years older than you. When you're my age, you might be rethinking that. Anyway, Alex is great. Regardless, he's super jacked, and I think he's awesome.
Yeah, no, an amazingly successful person and great entrepreneur, obviously. It's just like, it's funny. Yeah, I do think you get like that extra 30% juice from just being shameless and just saying stuff that is going to piss people off because like the currency of digital content is comments, right? And you want people to tell you what an a-hole you are to boost. So
Yeah, the algos favor rage.
Eric Franchi hates dogs. He has said dogs are worthless and that anyone who has a dog is not focused enough on growing their business. Tell us what you think in the comments.
Unreal. I don't know what was in your coffee today, Joe, but I need some.
We haven't had a pod of just the two of us in a while, so we've had to be very like demure and serious for our CEO guests. So I'm just taking advantage of this opportunity to go off a little bit.
All right, live it. Do you remember how we first connected and how this whole thing came together? Like, do you have a recollection? If not, I went and retraced our steps.
I think we've told the story before, but give us the specifics.
Yeah, late 2023, you hit my radar. You were out there saying a lot of interesting and smart things. January of 24, I did what I never do, and I DM'd a stranger. And I was like, hey, you say some smart things. Are you in New York? And you were like, yes, actually, I am in New York. And I said, oh, cool, let's hang out. You came by the office. We hit it off. You gave me some like great advice, which I really appreciated. We met up again in Possible, started jamming on the idea of doing something together. And then our first episode, so Possible was April, then our first episode was in May. So went from cold DM to, starting a a pod and frankly a company 5 months later.
Yeah, very cool. Well, it obviously speaks to my general philosophy that I'm always pushing around social evangelism and getting your thoughts out there. I think we're going to touch on this a bit at the end of the pod, but I was talking to someone yesterday who was at a couple huge brands for a while as a marketer, and then she was at an agency, and she's looking for her next thing. And she like has expertise in CTV, and I'm like, CTV is like the hottest sector in digital advertising. Ad tech people are desperate to reach brand and agency people who do that and to know what they think and what they're looking for. Share your insights publicly.
Yeah.
Like if if you once a week shared like something meaty on LinkedIn and Twitter, like people would notice and people would care, and you would probably be able to find your next opportunity through sharing what you know in a public forum. I talk about it all the time. It's my shtick, whatever, but I think that remains just such a huge untapped opportunity for the average person. Obviously, for the average CEO or entrepreneur who wants to evangelize their company, but also just for any person who wants to like obtain some leverage and increase their own job prospects and career potential.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And from my perspective, one of the things that less on this pod, but just general kind of in real life that I try to emphasize with people is act. I don't know what the right phrase for this is. It could be just like kind of shoot your shot. Could just be all gas no brakes. But Tim Ferriss used to have this question he would ask guests very early on in his podcast, which is like if there was a billboard in Times Square that you could put a message on, what would it be? And I think mine would be something to the effect of just like go act, right? Like send the DM, jam on an idea, like start a pod, email that person. That's literally just like getting off zero and moving is if there's like one thing that I do that, I think has led to a lot of the good outcomes from my career, it's like just freaking going. So that's like my takeaway about just taking a step back, thinking about this whole thing. It's a little bit of a small example, small microcosm of how I think I might operate and get stuff done.
Well, it's two things. It's a bias for action, absolutely,
Yeah,
which
that's it.
which I think we share and is great. But it's also what Barish was saying when he was on about like exposure, and like people think like attention is frivolous and that they need like the real work is like being heads down and never talking about it and just doing it. And it's like, well, it's both. Like, yes, anyone who's successful is heads down. They have some sort of thing they're working on, whether they're a programmer or a writer or like a sales guy sending emails, like whatever it is. We all have that dimension of our work, but it's also serious work to be out there sharing your insights, helping other people do their jobs better, and showing them thereby how you can help them. And when you do that, when you increase your exposure, there's a whole world of opportunities that you never could have anticipated when you were starting to share that content publicly that will become available to you.
Good takeaway. Okay, so we're now 30-ish episodes into this pod by the time this one gets posted. 2 questions. How would you grade us on the work to date? And who was your favorite guest? Or maybe, your favorite pod or 2?
How would I grade us? That's a traumatic question for me as a former super type A like student. I'm like, don't make me give myself a grade. I don't know. I mean, instead of giving a grade, let me say that what we've done really well is to have a very specific focus and to stick to it, right? So we said when we launched the pod, like we obviously didn't want to do a general business podcast or even a general advertising podcast. We were like, there's a lot of content that's talking about like the ad tech or digital advertising news. So we want to be the only podcast that talks about how to grow companies in this industry. And I think we've done a really good job of staying true to that and having guests who are like uniquely well positioned to comment on it. I think what we probably could improve on is thinking about how to stay true to that while still like bringing more people in. Maybe like we obviously want to talk about ad tech a lot, but it's great to have like Jay Friedman on to talk about the agency world. I think if we could expand a little bit to just bring in those brand agency and publisher people that the ad tech people really want to hear from to understand how to bring their companies to market, that would be a good area on which to improve. What do you think?
I would give this a good grade. I don't know what the letter or the number that I would have in mind is. Like, look, the number of pods that make it to episode 3, and then the number of pods that make it to episode 10, you basically like take out everybody who's ever attempted to start a pod, right? So just getting to the point where you're like 30 episodes in puts you in just the far into the upper single digits of just kind of podcasts, right? So it's A, you made it. B, I think your point that the pod has carved out its own niche and stayed true to this idea of talking about how to grow businesses. We've done that, but I think we've kind of found something that's very interesting. And it occurred to me and this will go into favorite episodes, with the Sincera episode. That was a little bit of lightning in a bottle, where in real time, we just like workshopped with a founder. We talked about the biz, they were very kind of open and transparent. And the 1 or 2 times since that we've done that, like those are the ones where people reach out to me and they're like, whoa, that's awesome. Can I get on the list? Can I be next? Right. So it feels like we've got something that's interesting there that I'd like to see us do more of, which is just like really actionable, unique teardowns of the stuff that we think about.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, the real-time messaging and positioning workshop is like one way you can think about it, though it doesn't have to just be messaging and positioning. But yeah, I think it would be great too if I mean, obviously if it's a public company, it's a little tougher. Like not everyone's like the Vanderhooks is going to come on and just like talk about the positioning of their public company. But I think, yeah, like a lot of what I do in my content is comment on specific companies, because I've realized that people care about that way more than just like general, like theoretical advice. And so it risks being a little controversial. But if people are, if you're listening to this and you're willing to come on and workshop your, messaging and positioning in real time, especially if you've already gained some traction, then we'd love to do that. And I think it's a great opportunity, frankly, for companies that are well known and that have well known criticisms, for the CEO to come on and sort of take the opportunity to set the record straight. Like when we had BOK on from Scope 3, we straight up asked him the 3 most common criticisms of Scope 3, and we were like, "What do you think?" So yeah, I think that's a great type of episode.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of, what do you think your favorite episode or 2 was of the pop?
Yeah, I thought the Vanderhooks were great. Obviously, co-founders of Viant, clients of mine, longtime contacts of yours, LPs in the fund, conflicts disclosure. But they are the company that has crushed it the most with the like go direct, taking advantage of first-party communications channels playbook. And you can just see why, because you really need 2 things to be able to do that. You need to understand the industry really well and have provocative counter consensus takes, which they're just like full of. They're like an endless, well of those takes. And then you got to be willing to engage. And I think they're people who really appreciate the value of discourse and like influencing market perception. And, they've had a banner year. I mean, I think Viant last time I checked was up like 190% year over year. So, and I think that their public facing communications and their narrative shaping have played, a key role in that.
I agree. If there is one episode that people should listen to from this year to get everything of what we talk about, it would be that one. That was amazing, and it was well timed, right after that, kind of epic launch that they had. I think it was great, and not to sort of like repeat myself, but I thought that the Sincera episode, Mike, was really, really good. It was so like, I think, actionable for a lot of people and like open people's eyes. And then I thought the Brian O'Kelly episode, that was really good. I should have done this prior, but if we were to, take the transcript and run that through an LLM and compare it to other episodes, like there's undoubtedly we talked the least in that episode. And I remember like we were just like, that guy was, I think we were asking a lot of the right questions, and we were just sitting there, and then we had a text afterwards. We were like, geez, that was awesome. So in my mind, I think that was probably the other one that I would point folks to as just, sort of listen to someone who has like really figured out a lot of things.
Though, yeah, I agree. Those are 3 great episodes and great for different reasons. I think the thing about Brian is, and I think we can say, it's the most listened to episode by far. Brian has like a magnetic force field around him. And I think it's because he has such a clarity of purpose. And so when you talk to him, you automatically feel like I'm talking to someone who has like thought a lot about something, is very serious about it. And he's bringing me in to how seriously he feels and thinks about this issue. So you like, I think that's the force field, which is maybe something, for us all to take away in terms of like founders and CEO evangelism and all that stuff. Like, I think when you really care about something and you've thought about why it matters and you're willing to lean into why it matters, even in a way that like other people might make fun of, which we talked about with Brian and which he acknowledges, I think that is very powerful and is something that, especially in the ad tech industry, is really rare.
There's other folks that I would put in maybe that class that I've worked with or spent time with, and it's I think that, to your point, like the deep conviction. The other thing is super intelligent, and the confidence of having built and done this at a scale that few have. There's that intersection of those three things, and again, there's a handful of other people I would mention that have that force field around them, and you all seem to have those three things in common. All right, good that section of the pod. Come at us with feedback and ideas, and if you want to do a tear down, I think that's a great idea. All right, let's move on to ad tech. It was a big year in a lot of ways. There was a lot of big trends that emerged in no particular order: streaming, CTV, commerce, media, AI, curation. A couple of companies captured our attention. Who's at the top of the leaderboard in your mind for, companies and maybe individuals that captured our attention and, rose above the pack in this fight for just, mind share in a crowded space?
I'm thinking primarily about two trends. One is quality and the other is performance slash outcomes. So in the quality bucket for 2024, and I think this is how I'll remember this year in ad tech. This was the year of the anti-MFA craze. This was the year of curation and everyone losing their minds over it. This was the year of the trade desk moving from the open internet to the premium internet and launching SP 500 Plus, which, was an attempt to demarcate what the premium internet is to some extent. I think that is actually like that focus on quality is a sort of countercultural trend moving against the dominant trend of this era of digital advertising, which I've been calling the outcomes era. Like, I think the giant businesses that Google and Meta have built in this industry, search and social combined being like a $500 billion category, whereas like CTV obviously still nascent but it's like 30 billion, linear is 60. Like, the reason those are such massive categories is because Google and Meta have figured out the magic formula, or they claim to have figured it out, to say, like, just give us your money and we'll produce outcomes. And ultimately, like, that is what advertisers care the most about. And every other company in digital advertising is, I think, just trying to meet that bar of driving clear outcomes. And I think, like, if you can read a lot of the challenges that the open web faces through that lens of just like, it's messy, there are these quality issues, these fraud issues, but really what it all comes back to is this anxiety on the part of advertisers. It's like, are you actually going to be an efficient vehicle to drive the outcomes I need or not? And Google and Meta sort of having answered that question in the minds of so many advertisers, especially a whole universe of advertisers, meaning like performance advertisers whom other inventory sources haven't reached, like that is their ultimate differentiator. And then we've seen that this year with the rise of what is now the most valuable independent ad tech company, meaning not the big tech platforms, which is AppLovin, right? Like AppLovin is essentially a performance vehicle for e-commerce advertisers, mobile games, and the like, and all they care about is outcomes. And clearly, AppLovin has cracked the code on come to us, tell us what you want, we'll drive outcomes. And now they're more valuable than the number one paragon of the brand advertising paradigm, which is the trade desk.
Yeah, that was great. That was an awesome framework. The thing that's so interesting about AppLovin is they're the counterfactual to a lot of what we talk about on the pod. I remember when they had that monster earnings just in Q4, it was just a few months ago. And, I tweeted, they're now more valuable than TTD. It felt like everybody was like, wait, what? And then, you had this then, kind of small and then large focus on AppLovin with the discourse. But if you take a step back and think about it, have they been in the discourse prior to that? Has Adam, the CEO, been, on LinkedIn talking about all their product advancements in ad tech? They're so interesting because it was completely around showing their performance from, a financial and growth perspective, which again, to your point, maps back to driving outcomes, driving advertiser performance. So it's so fascinating. I think they're continually going to be one to watch in 2025. So with that framework of quality and outcomes, the big three, big four companies aside, TTD, Meta, Google, AppLovin, who are the up and comers who captured some mind share when, kind of mapping to those things, right? So if we think about quality, some of the conversation was around curation and MFA. When we think about outcomes, certainly, it's early, but a lot of the conversation is around AI. Who did it well, and are there other topics that don't necessarily kind of fit there, where people or companies, rose to greater prominence by capturing attention?
Well, there's this tension between quality and outcomes, right? Like, I think these are sort of the two poles of the like digital advertising like idea sphere. Is like, on the one hand, you just want outcomes. On the other hand, you want to make sure that you're not buying like crappy inventory, and that you like are actually reaching those outcomes efficiently. That you're not engendering brand safety concerns en route to driving those outcomes. And so I think a lot of the big topics we've seen this year are sort of related to those issues. I mean, obviously, there's the rise of curation. This was a term almost nobody was using before 2024, and now it's very widely used, and it's become like a dominant ad tech buzzword.
When you say curation, who comes to mind? What companies come to mind? What individuals come to mind that are dominating the discourse, that are building a brand on the back of this trend?
Well, funnily enough, I think that, well, no, I mean, there has been consistency there in that, like, Audigent has been in the media a lot. I think they did a very good job of becoming synonymous with that term. Friend, colleague of mine, Rich Cherowich at Wit Strategy, he played a role in helping them do that, I think. And from a media relations standpoint, and like they were mentioned in a lot of the curation stories. There were anti-curation stories because for some reason the ad tech media like freaking hates curation, and like Audigen would be like the only like supporter of curation cited in like a story about it. So that was huge for them, and obviously it was just announced that they were acquired by Experian. Lotame, you know, Lotame, I think is a representative of the Go Direct playbook in that we've thought about them like one time in the last few years as an entire industry. And when was it? It was when Andy Monfried frickin' hopped on Twitter and LinkedIn and like blew up the news cycle for a week by criticizing the trade desk. And, some people had critiques of Andy's critique, but is talking about the trade desk essentially throttling sell side curation partners was part of moving curation into the center of the discourse. And I think you could show, if you wanted to do like an archaeology of the curation discourse, that Andy's critique of the trade desk preceded that like total blow up over curation by like a week or two. Because when I asked him on Twitter, like, what are you really talking about? He was talking about curation essentially. And then I have a client, Azerion, that is doing the same thing, sell side curation. And they've been pushing that constantly and getting some pretty good feedback on LinkedIn and Twitter for doing the same. So I think that, yeah, those are three companies that have actively been pushing it in one way or another, either traditional PR, Go Direct, modern PR, and we've seen the fruits of that.
Maybe this is where we transition into things that we're excited about in 2025. I would say that the closest, actionable topic around the outcomes side has been certainly AI. And I think that, again, Viant absolutely crushed it this year with the demo and the associated reach that got with the video. It was really good. So I think we see more of that type of stuff in 25. The other thing, before we get into 25, Google antitrust and how architecture and Ari just completely own that. I think we have to give a shout out for that one.
As Ari was asking about on Twitter a couple months ago in a how do you do fellow kids moment, let's give Ari his flowers. Yeah, he covered that trial like very seriously and constantly. I mean, he went down to the trial, right? And he was doing daily updates. I think that was a moment probably for architecture, which also had a huge year in terms of like really leveling up as a media organization. And obviously they've been like commanding attention and they've become one of the top 2 or 3 digital advertising media sources in quick order. But I think, having the commitment to go down and cover the trial in person and do a daily update was a big moment for them. And they seem to be thriving.
Yeah, and we're working with Ari on the pod and being an investor in architecture. I can tell you, like that guy worked his butt off for weeks, months. It was it was actually inspiring because he doesn't need to do any of that stuff, and he just purely did it out of passion. So again, shout out to Ari. All right, 25. What are we going to be talking about? What are we thinking about?
I was talking to, as I mentioned, someone who called me yesterday and who had been at brands and agencies and was looking for their next step. And I was like, I mean, if you just want to know what sector, like, I think is going to be hot, I mean, I would go into CTV. And if you could do something around the convergence of AI and CTV, probably even better. But like CTV is, I believe, the fastest growing advertising channel. As I said, 35 billion in CTV spend. There's still 60 billion in linear spend that needs to move over. But also, as my client, your portfolio company, TV Scientific, would argue, there's an even bigger and like massive opportunity in CTV in aligning CTV with the dominant paradigm of the outcomes era, which is to say, if you can transform CTV or TV as a whole into a performance channel, you could potentially get those tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of dollars in spend from search and social, which have been the dominant performance channels and might be plateauing or are eventually going to plateau. So I'm very keen on seeing how CTV evolves in 2025. If performance CTV can make meaningful strides in terms of how people perceive the channel and how they're spending on the channel, if e-commerce advertisers, for example, are diving deeper into it, which of course they're obsessed with performance and are sort of pillars of that ecosystem, and what role AI has to play, which also speaks to the Viant piece, right? TTD recently said CTV is their largest and fastest growing channel. I believe the same is true for Viant. And so, Viant AI, which took the, adtech ecosystem by storm by touting AI media planning capabilities, will in large part be, a CTV media planning automation vehicle. And I'll be curious to see how that evolves in terms of adoption and perception next year.
I agree. And I would tack on a few other things that I think are going to be interesting to watch in CTV for next year. One is just innovation around the ad experience, the ad format itself. I called it out. I said, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, I forget what I said on X. You're going to see like real improvement in ad formats. And what I really liked was that the haters came out, which makes me think, we'll talk about this a little bit later on in terms of what we learned, but like when you have like a contrarian view on something you have strong conviction on, it's time to actually take a closer look on that. So I think that we're going to see like format innovation, which I think ends up, benefiting, the stuff that you talked about before. I've come around greatly on, the intersection of shopping and CTV. I think that, this like commerce television, the shoppable experience, it's part of that whole thesis around format innovation. I think we're going to see real activity there. And then from an AI perspective, the sort of guts of it in terms of like planning and workflow. But, I think particularly since, we're heavy investors in this stuff, how AI is going to, augment the creative process and improve the creative process and the personalization process. I think we see that in 2025. I'm about to name drop like nobody else right now. So I was talking to Sir Martin Sorrell yesterday, and he He's just amazing. Like that guy, you just sit there and like listen to him talk and like, just hear so much stuff. And he had this framework that I want to share with the listeners. When it comes to AI, his framework, his view is 2023 was the year of wow. Like, whoa, look at all this stuff, like incredible, the capabilities. 2024 was the year of how. Think about it from a advertiser perspective, like how might AI start to change things, start to disrupt things. And 2025 will be the year of now, meaning now we start to see the impact across everything from an advertising perspective, and not just related to CTV, but I think broadly, we start to see the value created and some of the, frankly, disruption happen in 2025.
Ari was mentioning on the Architecture podcast that, the agencies, for example, have been talking a big game about AI, and he's like, well, let me see it. And I
So he said it. He said it for everybody. He was like, outside of the biggest platforms, right? Who are built like $10+ billion businesses with the customized algorithmic performance engines. Like, where is it happening? And my answer to him has always been like, dude, it's happening, but it's happening at the early stage, and you just need time for that. And I think that it all comes together starting next year.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting, in keeping with the theme of the pod, like how do you bring those innovations to market? Like the big challenge and like the sort of paradox with like early innovations or like that are very hyped is they simultaneously are like completely new, and yet they risk feeling stale or almost undifferentiated because everyone's saying they can do it, right? So everyone's saying they can do AI. So even though there aren't that many like AI implementations like in the market, transforming how advertising is working, when you just say it, people are like, yeah, well, like whatever. Like every company in digital advertising is technology is saying that they can that they have an AI product. So that is why I think that the Viant AI release with the demo was one of the biggest releases of the year. And, we said one of the biggest, if not the biggest ad tech product launch of all time. It was because everyone has been talking about AI automating digital advertising, transforming how it works. And they, hopped on a video, a 12-minute video, and put it on LinkedIn and showed the world, yeah, this is how it's going to work. It works already. We will show it to you in real time. So that's a tip for all of the big companies looking to launch AI innovations in advertising. Show, don't tell.
Think about Sir Martin's framework. He said 2024 was the year of how. What did they do? They showed how. So it's fascinating stuff. All right, let's get a little personal, from a biz perspective. What did you learn, in your own practice, in your own business, that you'd like to share and that you'll be taking with you into 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, I have three things for you. One is I always talk about marketing as a vehicle to build your reputation and relationships. I mean, I saw the fruits of that this year. It's taken me, years of doing that. Like I've been creating content for a long time. And I got on Twitter in September of 2023. And this year, I really saw like the fruits of that investment materialize. And part of that was obviously like us meeting and starting the pod. That helped a ton. But I think that it is just the 2024 or 2025 now version of like your network is your net worth. Like you have to invest in your reputation and relationships. And yes, part of that is the old school, like, reaching out to people, being thoughtful, one on one networking, all that stuff. But if you can market yourself and take advantage of the first party communications channels at your disposal to build your reputation and relationships, you can dramatically accelerate that and you can unlock opportunities that would have been, 10 or 20 years down the line. And I've seen that in my business this year. And obviously, it's what I preach. And I'd love to see more people do that. The second thing is that your differentiator needs to be easily comprehensible and tangible. I often talk about this with clients where like, well, this is how we're different. I'm like, it's got to be way simpler than that, right? It's got to be like one simple thing where it's like, we are the biggest company that does this, or we are for the biggest companies that do this. It can't be like some intricate technical explanation of how you're different from someone else. Or, all of these other companies were really made for web. They're not made for CTV, and we're CTV native. And here are all the benefits of that. Like in my own business, really what has helped SharkPen grow a lot this year is that I've become known for the content-led PR approach or the go direct approach. And like I had things that were helping me get business before. Like you said, like I'm on Twitter, I have a newsletter, I'm on LinkedIn. Like you can read my stuff and maybe you think like, oh, this guy kind of has some like smart thoughts and is like more analytical than the average marketer. And like I'd like him to work with us. Like that's fine. And that has helped me get business and it helps me keep my clients. But having a like tangibly distinct approach in content-led PR, saying that traditional PR is broken and that like that's not how people consume information anymore. And like you need to be on social media and I'll like teach you how to do that. And you can see that I do it for myself. That tangible differentiator is what has made a huge difference to my business. And it was a really good year for SharpEnd. Like profits were up like 60% over my previous like year-long high. And you were a big part of that. So thanks, buddy. And then the and then the other thing I would say is do one thing very well. So, you need product, marketing, audience alignment. Like for me, going all in on evangelism, going all in on the content-led approach to PR. I still do some other things that are maybe like, 30% of my business, but that's like the 80-20, or the 70-30. And just like having that be the core where it's like, that's what I do for myself. Everyone sees me doing that, creating content as a business owner and helping my other clients do that, touting them, talking about the benefits constantly. I think becoming obsessive about one thing is a huge advantage. And you see that, for example, like we're gonna, I think the week before after this, the episode of Jason Fairchild from TV Scientific is going to go live. Like being the performance TV or performance CTV company, like having that level of focus and making an intervention in the market and saying, we're going to change the market in this one specific way because the way it's working now doesn't work and we can make it work better. That focus is extremely valuable.
I'll give you mine. So it, like you, reputation has been on my mind a lot this year. With the nature of the core of Aperium, which is the investing practice, it's all about reputation. And I can point to some of the best things that have happened this year. And we're on year 7, so some of the compounding is, I think, starting to kick in. And so much of it was about opportunities coming our way or opportunities that we were able to create that was by virtue of reputation. This year, I think that, really kind of came home and underscored it. Maybe that's, just the nature of the pod we're having and the conversation we're having and the time of year. You start to think about that stuff a little bit more. But B, I've also been thinking about not just like reputation building, but for want of a better term, like reputation maintenance and, being thoughtful about the things that we take on, being thoughtful about the things that we partner on, again, sure, this could be, we in a collective we, because, reputation is also like, a thing that you can make a misstep with. So, just like, preserving it in addition to building it is, something that's been on my mind. Just being like, super focused on, the things that help to be positive expected value and negative expected value.
Yeah, I think there's a really important point there, Eric, because you and I, we often laugh about the intergenerational dynamic. We're at different points in our careers. Like my reputation has grown a lot this year because I was starting from a much lower place than you. For you, as someone who's already had like big notable successes, what I really admire about you is like you're not content to sit on your laurels. And I think you understand something really important, which is that like the reputations of like great individuals, when they decline, they almost never decline fast. Like we pay attention to the scandals, right? Like when someone suddenly something horrible happens and like their reputation gets shattered overnight. That's like 2% of cases. 98% of cases are that you have a big success. You don't actively work to be a steward of your reputation and to make sure you're introducing yourself to the next generation. And you just sort of slowly fade into obsolescence. And you are a great example of someone who is like very actively continuing to build your reputation, and also to make sure that you're availing yourself of like the next generation of communications channels, like doing this podcast, and you're like commenting on the state of the market as it is now. Like, I've been on calls with a lot of people who, are maybe 20 years older than you are, and who like their perspective is just like, it's just like telling you about like, and I'll tell you what it's like for me as like a 29-year-old. It's like telling you about stuff that was happening when you were like in elementary school. And you're just like, I mean, thanks for the perspective, but it's like, and there is value in that. Like, I'm being a little like irreverent, but it's like, you also need to be really up on what's happening now. It's both. It's the experience and the engagement with what's happening today. So I think you even doing this and like everything you do in terms of public facing communications and interaction is a sign that you're like very actively working to build your reputation, and like that will not happen to you. And I think a lot of people could learn from that.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That struck me to my core, the fear of being the back in my day guy. It might be inevitable that it happens to everybody, but I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna go down swimming.
Yeah, I think it happens to everyone a little bit, and that's fine. But it's like, it's just making sure that that's like 20% of what you're contributing, and that 80% is just being engaged in what's happening today and bringing your experience to bear, but not just being like, here's a story.
Everything was better. Yeah, like everything's better back in my day. Like f that. We're also sort of aligned on just this power of content. I'm a big admirer of Naval Ravikant. Do you follow Naval?
No, I don't.
Do you know who he is?
I do not.
Oh, I'm going to send you down a rabbit hole after that. So just follow Naval, I believe, on X. He's the founder of AngelList and just an amazing thinker. And he's great because he puts his thoughts out online. And he said something once that he said it years ago, and it's been in my mind ever since. And I saw it happen this year. I'll paraphrase. It's basically something like code and media are great because they're infinitely scalable. And media, we saw the power of that. And by media, I mean content. This year, with a lot of the stuff that we've been doing with this pod, and certainly like other stuff, which is like, you never know who's listening to this stuff. You never know who like saw that, kind of banger of a tweet, or maybe not even a banger of a tweet, one that was like super resonant with somebody that you would be shocked, like listens to your pod or watches your stuff, right? So, just underscoring how important creating content is because of the nature of the internet, and that things are infinitely scalable, and you just kind of like never know who it reaches and when it reaches them, has been underscored with me like a bunch of times this year. And we've even seen it with the pod, a few people that reached out to you. Hey, I'm interested, in talking to you about business because, you say great things on the internet and on the pod. So this idea of like, what we do is just so infinitely scalable. We don't need to be out there like on the street corner, like yelling just because, we're in the modern age. That hit home this year to me, and just more reason to keep doing what we do in the future.
It's just the modern version of the old school, like, how many people did you call today, right? It's like that, and that doesn't mean that the old school version is gone. It's still very much present, but there's just another dimension to it that's infinitely scalable, which is like, I was looking through my newsletter subscriber list yesterday, and I saw like the CEO of Publicis and like a region is like, he's been reading my newsletter for the past few months, right? It's like that kind of thing. It's just like, how many people did you call today? It's like, well, I didn't, maybe I called 5 people, but I reached, 1,000 or 10,000 people via my content. And so that's an opportunity it's still so undervalued, and you just cannot fail to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Final one, and this will be a little bit more endemic to my line of work with investing. It's just so funny. It's crazy you've never followed Naval. You're going to go down a rabbit hole. I'm not going to see you for a month. But he had a, and he's an older guy than me. Like he's amazing. He had a tweet this week that basically summarized my career, and it like is like 6 words, 7 words. The best investors have no use for spreadsheets. I saw that and I just like hit the floor. and it was pithy and it was like contrarian, right? Just because like bankers and analysts and spreadsheets 24/7. But as an investor, there's like one thing that matters. The one thing that matters is getting into the best companies possible. And that ain't a spreadsheet game. That's like reputation and judgment and thoughtfulness and access and helping those companies in some small way over time, right? And this year, again, so some of this stuff you've seen play out publicly with some great outcomes and rounds. Some of this stuff is still happening behind the scenes. Like it just hit home to me that the concept of the power law is real, where there's a handful of in a venture portfolio, a handful of companies that drive disproportionate outcomes, and I think there's power laws in life all around us if we look around it. And so much of what we talk about on this pod, and so much of like even the subject of this conversation, play into that idea of making sure that you get into those best opportunities possible. So again, it's a time of year. Maybe I'm just like tipping my hand that I get like kind of reflective and philosophical, in December of every year, maybe as I've gotten older. But that one was like axe between the eyes. Like I couldn't have screamed louder inside when I saw that tweet.
I love being reflective and philosophical, but in the spirit of that pithy and controversial treat, investor Eric Franchi has been riding on private jets with Martin Sorrell without any dogs, which he hates. He also says that your spreadsheets are dumb, and if you've ever been in a spreadsheet, you are wasting your time and don't understand the first thing about business.
You're gonna get me killed. God forbid. Listen, man, this has been a great year. It's been so much fun working with you on this pod, man, and I can't wait for 25. And to everybody that's tuned in, thank you so much. We appreciate the listens, even if you don't talk about it with us. But if you reach out and tell us about it, we love that as well.
Yeah, and seriously, for if you are listening to this pod and you have advice or things you'd like to see us do in 2025, to the point about grading ourselves and things we could do better, we would love to hear from you. Like we'd love your insights on things you want to hear and that you would share with your friends. So thank you. We're coming back even more controversial in 2025, and we thank you for your time and your listening.
Amazing. Thanks, everybody. Have a great holiday season and Happy New Year. Joe, I'll see you in 25.
Bye, guys.